Hello and welcome to the Essential Property Podcast with your hosts, Paul Samuda and Amanda Woodward. With 45 years of combined experience in the world of property buying, selling, investing and developing, they are here to share with you their knowledge in the Stoke-on-Trent, Newcastle Under Lyme and Crewe property market. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Essential Property Podcast, where we discuss all things related to property in Crewe, Stoke and Newcastle Under Lyme. My name is Amanda Woodward and I am pleased to have with me Daniel Sim, a successful property investor and developer based in Singapore and investing in the UK. In this International Investor Special, Daniel shares why he decided to invest thousands of miles from home and his success and challenges experienced whilst investing in the Stoke, Newcastle and Crewe area. So welcome, Daniel.
Oh, thanks, Amanda, for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. So we're going to dive straight in, Daniel, because I've got a whole bunch of stuff that I want to ask you that I think is going to be value. We have a mix of UK-based investors and international investors that listen to the podcast. And as an international investor yourself, investing predominantly in Crewe and with some of your clients investing in Stoke as well, I think it would be great to just understand a little bit more about those decisions to invest, obviously so far from where you're based, how you've experienced it, you know, the highs, the lows, the challenges, and some stuff that you do locally as well. Is that okay?
Sure, absolutely.
Fantastic. So let's kick off and just tell us a little bit about your background, perhaps before you decided to invest into property and what you were doing then, and then, you know, why you decided to take that step.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm from Singapore. My name is Daniel and I'm 38 this year. And I really started, maybe let me rewind a little bit. I started where a significant milestone in my property journey is I'm thinking back to my childhood, where I realized that, you know, growing up sometimes, or actually a lot of time, money was the source of tension in the household. And that kind of shaped my personal belief around money that, you know, growing up and now as a father of two kids, you know, I really don't want money to be a source of tension in mine. And it doesn't mean that I have to drive the flashiest cars, live in you know, the biggest houses, but you know, money is it's a good servant, but it's not a good master. So how could we be then masters of money? And that really got me searching in many different ways. I invested in the stock market, I traded options. And, you know, when I came to learn from a mentor of mine that has invested in property in the UK, that really opened my eyes. And I think it really fit my temperament as well, because, you know, I was so anxious, you know, in the past on my phone, like, oh, did the stocks I buy go up? I mean, I always joke with my friends that if you want a stock tip, you just you know, do the opposite of what I do in the stock market. Everything I buy seems to go down. And I think, you know, when it comes to property, you kind of set it up once. You get the right knowledge, you do it once, and then it continues to pay you for life. And I remember this moment where Claire, my daughter, was a baby, and I woke up at, I think it was 2 or 3 a.m. God knows the time, and she was crying, and I was changing her diaper, and I checked. I picked up my phone, and therein was an email from a letting agent. And I know you run a great lettings outfit as well, Amanda. And it told me that the rent for the month on one of my Golden Goose properties had come in, and I was like, that hit me hard. Like, you know, people always talk about the idea of financial freedom and investing in property and passive income. But that hit me that, you know, I could be anywhere in the world. Like I was in Singapore, it could be any time. It was 2 a.m. and I could be doing anything. I was changing diapers, and there my assets were working hard for me. And I think that was really, I mean, a long answer to your question, but the journey that led me towards really specializing in the UK, and people ask me, do I invest in other countries? I don't. I primarily invest in the UK, and I do have quite a number of properties in Crewe, and a lot of my clients invest in Stoke and Newcastle as well. In fact, one of my clients just bought a property in Newcastle just last week. So we take them through a due diligence process, so I'm quite familiar with the areas.
Good stuff. I mean, that's a great backstory, Daniel. And I think there is often, you know, something does happen that triggers an aha moment when we think, actually, we're doing exactly what we want to be doing, or we're doing exactly what we think we should be doing. So especially at 3 a.m. with your daughter, that's definitely a significant trigger. So you decided, okay, it's going to be property, it's going to be rental income primarily that you're going to be focusing on. So did you start off by looking at the UK as a whole and then looking at different areas? And how did you stumble into our Stoke, Newcastle and Crewe area?
Yeah, that's a great question. So maybe a little bit of a background to the mindset of international investors, especially those of us based in Asia, it could be Singapore or Hong Kong, is that property prices are just so expensive. You know, a small apartment is going to cost you in excess of £600,000-700,000. And even though it costs so much, it's not going to give you any cash flow at all. So that's terrible. Imagine you take that same amount of money and invest it in properties in Crewe or Stoke or Newcastle. and you're going to get many more, what I like to call golden goose properties that lay you golden eggs every month. So that was first, it was a huge aha moment for me to say that, what? You mean I can buy a terrace house in the UK for like 100,000 or less? Because in Singapore, it's going to cost me 2 or 3 million. And I never in my wildest dreams would have imagined that I could own a portfolio of terrace houses. It seemed so impossible that I didn't even think about it. So when someone, when I learned from my mentor that it was possible, wow, my eyes were just open. And I think a lot of us in Asia, probably don't even know about places like Crewe or Stoke, which, I mean, for us as investors, is a great thing, isn't it? Because it's a bit of a gold mine, or I call it a golden goose investing hotspot. Whereas a lot of amateurs just rush into big city centers, London, and maybe city center in Manchester and Liverpool and the like, without realizing that it just doesn't fit the strategy for passive income.
Yeah. And when you're looking at those areas, you mentioned the word strategy there, Daniel, which is a really important word in terms of you can go into the centre of Stoke, for example, and you could buy flats, or you could maybe invest in student-let properties, but maybe not in the right area. So what was your initial strategy when looking at those areas, and did it work initially?
Right. So great question. My initial strategy and why I got excited about this whole area that you're operating in, Amanda, is really the HS2. I think coming from Asia, we're all excited whenever there are train lines being built. And a lot of foreign national investors tend to buy properties next to the train station. Things are going to go up a lot in value. And therein goes back to your question on strategy, which is, people hope that properties appreciate in value. But I always tell my clients, my students, they hope it's not a good strategy,
yes.
right? And we're really looking more for the income from day one. And believe it or not, it's really more the spillover effect of the HS2 rather than the HS2 itself, be tenants and jobs and stuff like that. So interestingly, when I first started investing in Crewe, I think we bought like a property a month for a few months because we were so excited. I was in the UK. In fact, I'll be going up to the UK in February next year, bring a group of investors on what we call a golden goose shopping trip, right, or a field trip. So, and it's in these trips where we look at properties, we hunt for them, we do our due diligence, and then we buy them. And the initial model was to let it out as a professional HMO. But I think you would know this, Amanda, I'm sure, that there was a challenge a couple of years ago in Crewe where there was a bit more of a challenge in the HMO market. And then we had to kind of pivot to move towards a bit of a social housing model. But interestingly, in the last year, I've seen the HMO market just recover. And, our HMOs now are doing very well, even for professional lads, people from working in the hospitals. So, yeah, I think what's important and what I've realized is there are multiple exits, right, that for these properties. So yeah, that really is a little bit about our journey. And I see lots of opportunities, lots of money, regeneration that the government is putting into these areas as well. So I think from a foreign national investor point of view, it always helps that, you're not buying a property in the middle of nowhere where it's not connected and there's no one living there.
I mean, HS2 in Crewe being sort of the hub before the HS2 splits in the north, routes split in the north. Stoke and Crewe were actually battling for who was going to have, the main hub, and Crewe won, which we think was probably due to a number of different reasons. But Crewe has a really good history with railways, with trains, and they managed to get the hub there. And, work is looking to start over the next few years, which will then take around about 10 years really to come to fruition. So it certainly is sort of a long-term gain. But I think you're right, it's about the spillover. You don't have to have a property next to the train station. Just the fact that Crewe has that coming, and also the regeneration that the local authority then bring into the area to support it, hopefully we'll all benefit. But you certainly need to tell your investors, we definitely got to think long-term when it comes to HS2. But HMOs work really well in Crewe. And obviously the social housing strategy that you've got into works well. So that sounds even more passive than the normal passive strategy for you and your investors, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for investing overseas, I think a big thing, which is why we love working with people like yourselves, Amanda, is firstly, you're local to the area, the streets in and out, what strategies work in what particular streets. And I think a big part of it is you guys being the hands on feet on the ground. A big part of that is also the trust factor. So I would say, it's not so much like an amateur investor where we just buy anything and then hope that it goes up. It does involve the initial setup. I think for foreign nationals, the big thing is really the research and due diligence process, which one thing I always say is that you should never outsource that. You can outsource everything else, yes, but you need to own the decision to buy the deal. And thereafter, working with, trusted networks like yourself, which takes a lot of the hassle away from the investor. A funny story, Amanda, this just happened yesterday. I was thinking of doing a YouTube video on it, and I was thinking of titling it, Shit Happens, because I got an email, pardon the French, but I got an email saying that one of the pipes had burst. This is the word for word in the email. There's feces flowing out of the pipe. I was like, oh my gosh. If I didn't have a team on the ground, I could call and say, hey, you know what, this happened. And then thankfully somebody said, yeah, we're on it. We're going to send a plumber. We're going to send someone out. And I was like, phew, you know, there's no chance I can deal with it, right? Because I'm so many miles away. And the funny thing is a lot of foreign investors have the false sense of security, thinking that, oh, I'm in Singapore, I'm in Hong Kong. Let me buy properties within a 2-3 hour radius, you know, of a flight or a drive, whatever. But it's really a false sense of security because there's nothing you're not going to drive there. You don't have the expertise to fix it anyway. So really is, I would say yes to your question. We do look for the property to be fairly stable over time. Is really then working with, you know, professionals such as yourself that take away a lot of that headache.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, day in, day out, the maintenance requests and the stuff that happens here, Daniel, I could write a book or two, I think. But there you go. So you mentioned to me just before we kicked off on the podcast that you've been investing in the UK for around about 10 years. Is that right?
That's right.
Wow, that's a long time. So casting your mind back, sort of knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently to how you have started and progressed?
Wow, that's such a great question. I think, yeah, initially when I was starting out, obviously, I think this is a big preoccupation for investors, both either based in the UK or international, is you're always hunting for that one perfect or the best deal, isn't it? And at the start, it was very much like that because, you know, when you're starting out, your funds are, you know, you're thinking, I can't afford to do a wrong deal, so to speak, which was really, I think, a mindset of scarcity because, I mean, even definitely you don't want to do a wrong deal, but good is the enemy of great, isn't it? So there are lots of good deals, but in my mind, I was on the hunt for a great deal. And I think there were many good deals that passed me by that perhaps, you know, the ROI was a little bit lower than what I was looking for, or the refurb was a bit higher than what I was prepared to do. And, you know, just waiting, just to give you an idea, in the first year, we bought one property. The second year, I think we bought one or we bought no properties. There was a point where, you know, I think it was a mentor who gave me a kick up the bum and we said, hey, Dan, you know, all that money sat in the bank and you're earning like what, 1% interest rate. If you had bought any other property that you thought wasn't great, but it's good, you have made, you know, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12%. So I think that's one thing that I would probably do differently, you know, to see it more as a portfolio approach rather than trying to strike the lottery with one property, which really is, I would say it's not going to help you build your portfolio and your passive income as quickly as you would like.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that you work with other investors locally in Singapore, and generally your clients are they on the very beginning of their portfolio building in the UK? They meet you at that point?
Yeah, so I mentor a private group of clients who are basically working really long hours, as many of us do before we discovered property, right? They're basically looking to create more passive income. Some of them are, you know, very good in active incomes. It could be in the profession that they have worked in their whole lives, doctors, lawyers, you know, people in the civil service, what have you, not realizing that they haven't channeled that funds that they had to building passive income assets. Some people are like first-time investors. They have been very frugal, save monies, and are looking to buy their first investment property. Some have bought properties and have had bad experiences. Some have, you know, okay experiences in property, but just because of the cooling measures that we have in Singapore, restricting, you know, loan to values, total lending, they're finding it just difficult to expand their portfolio, create more passive income. So that's where we assist them. I think in the same experience that you and I had, was like, wow, you know, investing in the UK, if you do it right, can help you get to your goals and replace your income in a few years.
Great stuff. So if we've got an international investor at the moment, let's say they're based in Singapore, Asia, or anywhere throughout the UK really, that hasn't yet invested into the UK market but is considering it, any words of advice in terms of where they should start? What's the first couple of things that they should do?
Wow, that's a difficult question. I would say that it goes back to what you mentioned earlier about strategy. Ultimately, it has to fit their strategy. So if they're looking to, you know, for example, park their assets in a place that would grow, you know, 20% in appreciation in a year, then probably these areas that we've been talking about probably wouldn't work because it's specifically geared towards growing in a narrow band, you know, 2-3% a year. And that's the way I like it because if there's a big market shakeout, then it's not going to be affected very much as well, which is perfect, you know, if you're investing for passive income and that's a strategy. But if they're thinking very much from a capital appreciation point of view, then they need to go to where the strategy works, right? However, if they're looking for passive income, I would say generally not look into the south or nearer to London, because for the same pound invested, you're going to get much more bang for your buck in places like Crewe and Stoke. You can buy properties like maybe 100 grand. You're going to get a good yield on the property. You know, the beautiful thing about this, and if you have someone like Amanda on your team managing your properties, is that you almost forget about them. You just enjoy the income that you receive every month, which is kind of the goal, right? For all of us as property investors. So, but I think a word of caution is also not, even though your podcast is on Crewe, Stoke, and Newcastle, listeners, please don't just go there on your own. You think, oh, this is what Daniel and Amanda are saying, and just buy any property in these areas, because property is so street by street, and you really need to work with people who know the area. Me, who initially didn't know anything about these areas. For us in Asia, a lot of our association with places in the UK are football clubs. So if the city is doing well in football or in soccer, then we'll know a little bit more about it. Apart from that, it really is researching the area, talking to people who know the area, and importantly, people who have been there and done that to guide you along the process. So you don't, property is an expensive game to trial and error, isn't it?
Very, very. And we've made a ton of mistakes along the way. We've been investing for a similar time, probably about 11 years now, specifically in Stoke and Crewe. We've done some great deals, we've done some good deals, and I wouldn't say we've done any bad deals, but we have done deals where we thought that they were going to be better, let's say. Yeah. And we've mentioned on the podcast before, one of the very first properties that we purchased, which was in the student area of Shelton, just around the corner from Stoke University. We bought the property for £50,000. We spent about £15,000 on the refurb. We turned up on valuation day hoping for a valuation of 75, Daniel, and they valued it at the same 50 that we bought it at. And we thought, oh my goodness, this hasn't worked as we thought it was going to work. There you go. But we put some students in it. We got some great cash flow. And then we actually sold that property many years later for a great profit, because the student market in Stoke really did rocket, and we took the opportunity to pull out some equity in that property and invest into a different strategy. So there's always a way to make it work. There's a ton of deals out there. We get presented all the time, often from international investors as well, saying, I've been presented this deal by somebody, and it's just either wrong area, wrong strategy, or it just doesn't work. So that certainly is key. You mentioned about team on the ground. Now, obviously, you have letting agents on the ground who are physically managing the day in, the day out, the burst pipes, the tenants, the rental income, and so on. Would you say there's any other core members of your UK team that you rely on, and that other investors, UK or otherwise, should also be looking to build relationships with?
Yeah, certainly. I think, there are many members of the team who, it depends, right? If you're looking to just buy one property, then you don't really need such an extensive team. And some investors look to buy a property that's done up, refurbished, tenanted, then it's pretty straightforward. But if you're looking to build this seriously as a property business, then thinking around how it's like if you run any other business, you need people in the team with their own expertise. And I think a big part of the team that we spoke about earlier, Amanda, is obviously the lettings side of it. And it's this big headache where, especially as an international investor, a big fear is, we can't find tenants, tenants trash up our property. What do we do if they don't want to leave? Which, it's like a nightmare scenario for a landlord. Obviously, for you guys, maybe you could share a little bit later, if there's an opportunity, how would you deal with that scenario? But to answer your question, other members of the team, I would say builders, people, sourcing agents, especially if you're investing from overseas, people who know the areas well, which areas work well for what strategies, people who are on the ground and finding properties that are direct to vendor. I think that always helps because, the numbers stack up better, right? Rather than you're looking for a property that is, on the market that nobody wants to buy. And then here comes the next unsuspecting foreign investor being sold that property. Alongside that, I think it's what people or who people might need in a team are, the likes of solicitors, if you're looking for more creative deals, then planning consultants. And I think a big member of the team, which I forgot to mention, is a good broker or lender, because, international investing in the UK, financing is a huge hurdle to overcome, which over the years we have built. In initial years, it was totally tough. I had so many doors slam in my face. But, for our select network of people, they do get access to members of our team that can, gain access to maybe 75% loan to value, which is phenomenal. For a first-time investor, no experience in the UK.
Wow. Just summarising there, so we've got brokers, solicitors, builders, sourcing agents, letting agents, possibly planning consultants if you're looking to do some planning gains or just looking to achieve planning permission on a building. So how did you start to cultivate those relationships from a distance? And how would you recommend any of our listeners start to, how find, good people or trustworthy people?
That's a great question. And I think one way, the way I did it was to seek out a mentor who already had these networks of people. But over the years, I realized that actually my whole team that I have now is almost different from the initial team that was introduced to me, because, we all have our different working styles, preferences. Along the way, you meet different people. And I think the answer was kind of in the question that you asked, Amanda, which is really about relationships. People often think property is just about numbers and, and all that. But I think a big part of it is the relationship, isn't it? And that's why, we're on a podcast today like this, because we met in a room many years ago, probably didn't know each other then, but we continue to stay in touch and help each other out. And I think it really is, I would say a tip for investors, both in the UK and even overseas, is ask yourself this question: what would make someone like, a member of a team that you need on the ground, someone like Amanda, what would make Amanda want to work with you more as opposed to, the many other clients that she has? Is it because you move quickly? Is it because when you email her questions, you send in all the questions in one email, or do you send one question a day just to check that she's checking her emails? Simple things like that. I think always putting yourself in the other person's shoes. How can you make life easier for them? What would their ideal client look like? Yeah, these are questions I often ask myself. How can I add value to the members of the team? What can I do to make their life better? So I do this not to, it's not what do I say? I'm not doing this to try to get an outcome, because people can tell if you're sincere or not, right? So if you really are interested in people and their lives, then people will take care of you as well. And I find that really has created the longest lasting relationships. And many of these members of the team started off professional, working professionally, but a lot of them have become good friends as well.
That's really good to hear. And did I just hear you say that some of your clients are getting 70-75% loan to values and good interest rates? Was I right in hearing that?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's good, because I remember a few years back, we were approached by a lot of international investors. They were screaming because whilst they could get generally good loans to values, the interest rates were 7 and 8% plus, I think, being generated broadly from one lender. But having spoke to a number of other investors recently, most recently I was speaking to actually probably somebody that I won't mention his name. He's a gentleman who positions himself between Singapore, the UK, and another European country. And he was saying he's getting some stuff around the 4.5 or 4.9% mark, which, yes, it's a little bit higher than the UK investors, but still starts to make the deals a little bit more attractive. How are you finding the finance markets, Daniel?
Yeah, I think they're more, definitely compared to when we started investing, there are a lot more options opening up even for foreign nationals. Though I would say it's still... if you're trying to go to a high street bank, if you go to a bank in your local country, they're going to tell you can only buy properties in London zones 1 and 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, seriously, because that's the way they assess risk. And they think that if you're in London zone 1 and 2, it's safer, not realizing that probably, you're not going to get very much cash flow after you deduct the mortgage. So it beats me why, actually, you and I know the reason, because the employee working in the bank assessing risk isn't a property investor himself or herself, right? So they just think differently. But I would say, the lending options have definitely broadened. You probably can get 4-ish% once you're an experienced landlord with an established track record, credit score and stuff like that. But even for new investors, we do have connections to get them maybe in a 5-ish range. Yeah, even at 70 to 75%. Yeah, which, like you say, is a game changer. Because initially when I started investing, I paid the 7-ish% interest rates. But, even that's the beautiful thing, right? That even deals in Crewe and Stoke, even paying 7% interest, the deal still works. It still gives me cash flow. I think the important thing is to realize that it's the tenants that are paying the interest rates, not us. So even though it's so high, it's important to then check the numbers before you buy the deal to see if with that level of interest rates, does it still stack up? Does it still cash flow? Yeah. Of course, over time, if you work with someone who is experienced, they will then be able to help you to bring the interest rates on the portfolio down and squeeze out more yield on the portfolio, which actually I recently done for my portfolio as well. Yeah.
Good. And I think that's why a lot of the international investors go straight for HMOs, because the HMOs can take the higher interest rates where perhaps the buy-to-lets can't. So it seems to me that a lot of the international investors are going in for HMOs. Just something there to mention on capital growth and income. So we know that Stoke and Crewe is all about yield, and that's why we buy there, to generate a good return on investment. But just for anyone who does have property in Stoke and Crewe, we bought our early properties probably for around about £50,000 for a 3-bed terrace house. For that same 3-bed terrace house, albeit it was, needed refurbishment, for that same 3-bed terrace house now, pre-pandemic, you could probably pick it up for about 80 or 90. Post-pandemic and this sort of mini boom that we're experiencing here in the UK, you're probably looking at 100, 110. Yeah. So that has fit the perfect property, tends to double in 7 to 10 years. It's not a hard and fast rule, but we know that over time we are going to get growth. So if we do look forward 10 years, we will start to see that sort of 50 to 100% increase, not only with good rental income now, but even better rental income over time. We do have, the start of potentially a little hike of inflation here in the UK at the moment. So naturally there might be a little rental increase that comes along with that as well. So we're kind of winning on all areas, as long as we can maintain those properties over that period of time, keep the tenants, keep them cash flow and keep them in good condition, and hopefully not have too many burst pipes along the way and and problems to deal with. So we've mentioned a lot about sort of analysing deals for international investors to buy themselves, working with sourcing agents. Have you done any sort of joint ventures, or do any of your clients do any joint ventures in the UK, or do they more just like to purchase on their own? How do they sort of structure their deals?
Yeah, I think, initially for a lot of these clients, they start off, just owning the deal straight up, either individually or through a UK limited company. And I think with ownership of the property then comes, they feel like it's a bit safer. They have a bit more control and ownership of the property. So I would say most of the clients do it that way. In terms of joint ventures, I mean, it's important to make sure that you know who you're doing the joint venture with. So I do know some investors who do that, but I personally don't do joint ventures with these investors that are part of my network, just because I don't want to have a conflict of interest with that. But at the same time, if it's just because as a joint venture, there's a lot more due diligence that needs to go into the deal, both for the partner, for the deal. So it depends on the goals of the investor. If they want to take things to the next level, then great, because if you're going to buy to lets, you're not going to get to, say, if your goal is to maybe have a 20 grand a month income, or generate 500,000 in a year in a profit from a sale of a property, then that's going to take you a lot of buy to lets and HMOs. So you kind of got to operate on the next level. That's where the joint ventures come in. But if you're an investor, and you're thinking, hey, I don't really need to do that. I'm quite happy if I have 3 or 4 HMOs. I have a few grand of passive income coming in, and you can work to that over time. Be it. And I would say that's an important question to ask yourself, right? Like Amanda was saying, if there's 100,000 or 110 per property, how much rent would that generate? How much passive income will you get from that one property? And then reverse engineering that to say, okay, if I need 2 grand a month to cover my basic bills, then how many of these properties do I need? Cash would I need to then be able to buy those properties? And when can I get that cash? So you're almost from a dream, it becomes almost a reality where, okay, I know with this amount of savings, I can buy one property now. And if I continue working, I save and I put my bonuses together, I probably can buy one more in maybe, say, 3 years' time. Great. And maybe the next one in another 2 years' time. And there you have it. You have your plan to work towards that. So I think that's the thing where when it comes to investing in property, back to what you mentioned, a lesson that I learned from maybe 10 years back and now is I've learned to be more patient. We all want to smash our targets in 1 year and 2 years. And it took me a lot longer than I had expected. But you know what? It's an eventuality if you just keep your eyes focused on the goal. And, it's not too bad to retire in even 5-10 years' time, when most of your peers are probably still working till, I don't know when, God knows when. They probably need to continue working their whole lives. Yeah. So slow is fast. I think that's one thing I've realized.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, you and I are a similar age, Daniel, and I think slow and steady wins the race is certainly our mantra within our business, and consistency. If you're consistent in what you're doing over time, you'll get the results. But the get rich quick and the build a portfolio overnight and so on can work in the short term. I'm not quite sure how much longevity that strategy has over time. I guess only time will tell. Yeah. So you've really built up a network in Singapore and over Asia in terms of what you've been doing, because you've been doing it for so long now. And I think the UK, especially the north of the UK, over the last 10 years has become, you call it the golden goose hotspots, but it has become of more and more interest to international investors. So just for our listeners, just explain a little bit more about how you work with your clients. You mentioned a shopping trip coming over to the UK next year. Just talk to us a little bit about that. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, sure. I think, first of all, I run quite a number of free webinars. There's one coming up next Tuesday, and it's really meant to educate people, because this is a funny story funny that you asked me this, because a lot of times when I first started, I think earlier we were chatting about the same, right? When we start getting ourselves in the property business, build our portfolios, get a passive income, what we really want is then to just live life happily ever after, isn't it? That's what everybody wants to do. So people then ask me, why then do you do this? Why are you educating the students? And it really came from a place of, I would say, pain, where quite a number of close friends that I know had invested their hard-earned savings in properties, and they know that I invest in the UK. So they came to me and say, hey, Dan, I know you invest in the UK. Instead of saying, can you help me, or can you teach me how to do it? They came to me and they said, my investment went wrong. I can't rent it out. I can't sell it. What do I do? And as you say, it really boils down to knowing the area, having the right knowledge. So when I looked at that property, it was just in the wrong areas. I was like, no wonder you can't rent it out. So, and that pained me, because these people were, friends from school, people that I actually care about. And that's when my mentor gave me another kick. I think my bum is quite bruised by now. I mean, in this podcast, you heard lots of kicks. But he said, how many more people do you want to see lose money in property before you start sharing with them what you know? And that hit me, yeah. And that's the reason why I thought, if I could come over 2 hours, share with people what I've done, mistakes I've made so that they don't make the same mistakes, things I've learned, deals I've done, to kind of accelerate the process. I mean, you and I have been investing for 10, 11 years. Even this podcast, which is why I'm so happy to come on board to share, because if someone listens to this and they just take away one thing from this time, from a podcast on Amanda's session, and they apply it, it's going to compress the time, isn't it? It's not going to take them the same amount of time that you and I took to build to where we are at. So from there, those who are keen, really can come on a 2.5 day with me, a masterclass where I compress lessons over 10 years, and from I invite people who are experienced, people who have done deals, students that have gone on to be successful, to share about their deals. And in fact, we have the next one coming up in November, where one of our students that's invested in Stoke is going to come back and share about their deal. Brilliant, yes. And I think the beautiful thing about this is really a network of like-minded people that give back, they're thinking abundance and supporting each other, cheering each other on. Whenever somebody buys another Golden Goose property, they're there to support each other, cheer each other on. And if they have questions, as you and I know, we're always learning in this industry, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if they have a question they can ask, and there's a community of investors to then support them. Yeah. And for those who want to come with me to the UK, I always tell them that, first of all, there's great roast duck in Bayswater. So that's the real reason why we're there. But the secondary reason is to then go into the investing hotspots. Definitely you want to go over to Crewe and Stoke, other areas. We might pop by to visit you as well, Amanda.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very welcome.
And I think that's part of, it goes back to what you mentioned. How do you build a team of people that you can trust, even if you're investing remotely in Singapore, and have peace of mind? I think it's in trips like these, meeting people like you face to face, understanding what you do, your own journey, knowing that you're an investor yourself. I think all these, this builds assurance. And I would say, for those of you listening on this podcast and you haven't done anything in property, or you haven't spoken to Amanda and her team, pick up the phone, write an email, head to her office, whatever, and do something. I think the important thing is you could listen to 1,000 podcasts, and if you do nothing, it's not going to help you, because knowledge is one thing, but I think applying the knowledge is a big thing. And do the first deal, and from there, it's always, the first deal is always the most challenging, right? And the most difficult. But from there, you build confidence. You see, oh, wow, these people really conduct themselves professionally. They deliver on what they say they're going to do. And that's how trust is built. And then you do your second and your third, and you're off.
Good stuff. Look, Daniel, I mean, I think what you're doing in Singapore and Asia is great. And it's allowing people to make savvy investments into the UK. And not just investments that work for them, but also investments that are working well for the local community and the areas that they're investing in. Because, a HMO in the wrong area or a student-led property in the wrong area, it doesn't serve you guys. And it also doesn't serve the local community, because it's not bringing something that's needed. So if the sourcing agents and people like ourselves can point you and your clients in the right direction in terms of this is where the demand is, because this is what the community needs, whether it be social housing, buy-to-lets. I mean, we have a huge social housing need in the UK, which is growing. And I was actually on a webinar with a lady only a few weeks ago talking about that she just cannot get enough housing for her particular need in what she does with regards to social housing. So if we can, share that with you guys, you can then buy the properties that serve the local community. It's a win-win on both sides. Because I think there can be both positive and negative mindset locally about international investment into an area. I think we all know that international investment is good, but sometimes the local community aren't always as open to it. So I think if it serves them well, it just creates even more good, local relationships as well. So Daniel, our listeners, if they want to get in contact with you going forward, what's the best way to do so?
Well, yeah, great. Thanks for that. I just wanted to comment on what you said about serving the community. And I think you're absolutely spot on that. And that's a big part of our philosophy. I always tell the investors, it's about doing it with integrity. You're restoring, houses that maybe are derelict, and, turning it into a home for people. And I'm getting goosebumps even as I share that, because, I really strongly believe in that. And if you're creating a good, then it's about win-win. And, for those of you who are new in business, you might have your own preconceived notions about what property investing or what business is about. But I think that I strongly believe that we can do business from a place of integrity, from a place of win-win, from a place of, all parties benefiting from it. So, yeah. And to your question of people who want to be in touch, I have a YouTube channel. If you just go on YouTube and search Born Poor Die Rich, you should be able to find a channel there. You can go to my website, bornpoordierich.com. Or if you have a specific question, you can also email me at hello@bornpoordierich.com. And I think a little bit on the philosophy of Born Poor Die Rich is not a bad chase for money, but maybe a nice note for us to think about is, as we buy property, it's a great vehicle to generate passive income and yield. but what is the end destination that this vehicle will help us get to? What does that rich life, a life of purpose, really mean for us? And for me, it's a lot about time with family, time with the kids, time freedom, rather than chasing the next promotion, working weekends and stuff like that.
Good stuff. Great. Well, look, this has been fantastic. It's been a pleasure to welcome you onto the podcast, and no doubt we'll have you on again soon. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Amanda. Take care.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if so, please hit subscribe and share with those who you think would enjoy it too. To get in touch with Paul and Amanda directly, please visit their website www.essentialpropertyoptions.co.uk for more information. We look forward to sharing with you on the next episode.